On today's child seat review, we're taking a look at the 2015 Ford Fusion, also known in other world markets as the Ford Mondeo. This is a mid-size sedan in the United States, although it does seem like a very large car in other world markets. This is a Graco Classic Ride 50 child seat. It's a convertible seat suitable for forward or rearward facing installation and children between 4 and 50 pounds. In this video, we're going to see how well 1, 2, and 3 of them fit in the back of the Ford Fusion, how well they fit in the trunk, and whether or not you can fit an adult in the front seat as well as a rearward facing child seat in the back. The first step is to move this front passenger seat as far forward as I can and still be safe and comfortable. That means I want about an inch between my knees and the dashboard. You'll notice that I have more than an adequate amount of room between the front seat back and this rearward facing child seat. That's because of the size of the Ford Fusion. It's also because the front seat backs in the Fusion are relatively thin, and that does help with rear passenger legroom as well as child seat accommodation. This child seat is installed in the proper position as indicated by this little ball in the raceway. It's in the green zone right down there. You'll also notice, however, that we would need to insert towels underneath this child seat in order to keep it at the right level once it was strapped in. It's not actually strapped in the vehicle at the moment. Before we go any further, we need to talk about seatbelts, specifically this $150 optional inflatable seatbelt that you'll find on certain Ford and Lincoln products. The rationale behind the seatbelt is that it distributes the load more evenly across the body. So if I were sitting in this seat right like this and I had the seatbelt across my chest, you could see that it would be a relatively narrow area that's supposed to slow down 190 pounds in the event of an accident. Now if you can make that wider, then the accident forces are distributed more evenly across the chest, and that's exactly what this inflatable seatbelt does. It has an igniter right here at the end, and that igniter has sort of an airbag-like charge to it, and then this section of the seatbelt right here that's a little bit thicker than average is actually a small airbag, and it will deploy and it gets about 3 times wider than your average seatbelt. The inflatable seatbelt not only broadens that contact patch, but it also adds a little bit of added cushion in the deceleration phase. You should always check with your child seat manufacturer, and that would be Graco in our particular case, to make sure that an inflatable child seat is compatible with the child seat. Ford has done extensive research, and they say there's no problem using this child seat belt with your child seat as long as the child seat manufacturer also agrees. So you do want to make sure and contact your child seat manufacturer before you use an inflatable child seat belt for attaching the child seat to the car. You can of course also use the latch anchors without the inflatable child seat. That's not a problem at all. But I would definitely get this option. It's about $150 extra, and it's an important piece of safety technology, and it doesn't just help children or small adults or elderly people with brittle bone structures. It could also help anybody in a car just reduce the forces on their body. The Fusion has a split 60-40 folding rear seat back. It's especially important that you don't get this inflatable seatbelt caught in the mechanism that latches this seat back into place. It's going to cost you an awful lot more to replace an inflatable seatbelt than it would a regular seatbelt. Even though the Fusion is one of the longer mid-size stands available, it's not one of the wider mid-size stands across the back, and that means there's a little bit less room for adults and child seats together on this rear bench seat. In terms of child seat anchors, we have latch anchors for the outboard seating positions. We also have 3 top tether anchors in the rear bench. The top tether anchors are far enough away from the child seat that it's very easy to buckle in a child seat with larger buckles like these Classic Ride 50 seats that we have here. The headrests are also easily removable in this vehicle, which is a nice touch because frequently you have to remove them in order to properly anchor a child seat. You can anchor them over most headrests, however you will end up with indentations right here on the top of your headrest that may take a while to come out once you've removed the child seat. At 6 feet tall, I have a generous amount of legroom sitting behind myself. I have about 4 to 5 inches of legroom right back here on the driver's side, a bit more on the passenger side because of the way the dashboard is shaped. As a result, I was not able to comfortably fit a rearward facing child seat behind myself as the driver in this vehicle. However, I could if I moved my seat just a little bit further forward and was a little bit less comfortable up front. I would still be able to fit that right here behind myself. So it is entirely possible to fit 3 rearward facing child seats in the back of the Ford Fusion if you needed to. Although legroom is generous back here, headroom is much more limited than you'll find in the Camry or the Accord or any of those other very upright vehicles in this segment. It's all down to the sexy side profile in the Fusion. The roof really starts plunging very rapidly towards the rear, and that means that if I were to sit upright in a comfortable position in the seat, I'd actually have to cock my head to one side in order for my head to fit in the back. You won't have quite as much room across the rear bench seat as I noticed in the Volkswagen Passat or in the Honda Accord. There was a little bit more room between the child seat specifically and the door right over here, but it's no problem with these very average-sized child seats. The Graco Classic Ride 50 child seat was chosen for this review because it's a very average-sized child seat. It comes in right in the middle of the pack in terms of overall dimensions. Thanks to the Fusion's dimensions, this has one of the larger trunks in this segment. However, it's not quite as conveniently shaped as you'll find in some of the vehicles out there, most notably the Camry or the Altima, because we can't put a 24-inch roller bag in this upright position and close the trunk lid like you could in those other 2 vehicles. Still, the trunk of the Fusion is very accommodating, even though we have a trunk opening that is really more of a slot than a lid, as you could see in other vehicles. We can put a 26-inch roller bag without a problem right back here into the trunk and slide it all the way to the back. Do the same with this 24-inch roller bag, flip it around, push it all the way to the back of the trunk right there. Even though the Fusion has trunk hinges which do impact the size of the cargo area, they won't impact your cargo specifically because Ford has sequestered them inside compartments of their very own inside the trunk area. That means that they won't be bopping your bag. So if it fits in the trunk lid should close. We also have a nice assist handle right here, which is something that a lot of vehicles leave out, leaving you to paw on the painted area or pull off trim on the inside of your trunk trying to close the lid. Even though, as I said, this trunk opening is more of a slot, I have no problem inserting child seats in this fashion, which makes it an awful lot more useful. I'm actually going to go ahead and try and stick that one over there on that side, and I'll get the other two. As you can see, 3 child seats in the trunk, plus a 24-inch and a 26-inch roller bag are absolutely no problem for this large trunk area. You can also fit some additional luggage right there on top. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Ford Fusion. If you want to know more about the Fusion, you'll find the complete review on my channel as well. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos and over at Twitter as AlexNautos. I'll see you next week.